Welcome. I'm your host, Vince Poscente, and today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. There are those that believe that AI will actually change our world, that it's as or more important to us than the computer and the internet. Now, is artificial intelligence meant to be feared? Is it meant to be embraced? Or is it meant to actually somewhere in the middle where we adapt with this new technology? We have three guests with us today to discuss these issues of artificial intelligence. Dr. Gopal Gupta, a professor in the Computer Science Department at University of Texas, Dallas, and co-director of the Center for Applied AI and Machine Learning. We have author Bruce Turkel, who wrote Is That All There Is?, which is a book about how people of note pivot in their lives and how they adapt. And we have Mr. Byron Reese, a futurist, technologist, and founder of several high-tech companies. He's the author of 6 books about AI and the transformative effect of technology in the workplace. Now, Dr. Gupta, I'd like to start with you. Could you talk to us a bit about what artificial intelligence is and its origins?
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about intelligence first. So how do you characterize intelligence, human intelligence? So I would say that broadly speaking, you could classify intelligent behavior into 2 types. One is that we have the ability to learn. So we observe things, and we observe a pattern, and then we kind of generalize it, and then that what we learn sort of sits in our mind. And then once we have learned things, and of course somebody else may teach things to us as well. Once we have learned something, then we will apply it, and that is called reasoning. So we're able to reason, and so it could be that as a child, you drop a cup on the floor, it breaks, and then you see this happen several times, and then you realize as a child that okay, if I drop a fragile object on hard floor, it will break. And then once this rule sits in your mind, then you will apply it later for reasoning. Next time the child holds a cup, they will not drop it. So intelligent behavior could be broadly classified into learning and reasoning. If you automate the learning aspect, it's called machine learning, which is all the rage these days. And if you automate reasoning, then that's called automated reasoning. And automated reasoning was the focus of AI research for, you could say, the last 50, 60 years. And of course, machine learning has become the focus in the last 10 or so. So that's what AI is, the ability to reason, or intelligence is ability to reason and ability to learn. If you automate them both, you get, essentially machine learning and automated reasoning. And machine learning, when people say AI today, they really mean machine learning. So that's what AI is, essentially, how to automate intelligent reasoning and intelligent learning.
Now, Byron, why don't you jump in here and give us an idea of how AI is part of society today?
Well, it's a pretty basic technology in that what we do, the way we know how to do it is we take a lot of data about the past and we look for patterns in it, and we use those patterns to predict the future. And so it works in places where the future is like the past. So it's really good at things like routing you through a city, or spotting spam in your email box and those sorts of things. It really is ubiquitous. What is kind of new is that we kind of personified it, or we've kind of made it out to be something more than that. But that's really all it is. It's just it's a relatively straightforward and relatively simple technology that we are now able to do quite well because we have what we say better compute and better data. We have more powerful computers and more powerful data. So it's really an evolution less than I think a revolution.
Well, we're seeing it. It seems to be on every news report. We're hearing a lot about artificial intelligence, and the corporate landscape is doing a bit of a scramble as well. And Bruce, let me turn to you. What kinds of applications, or what are you seeing in terms of the corporate world pivoting to utilize this collaborative tool?
Well, thank you, Vince. It's quite simple. The corporate world is looking for efficiency. Efficiency tends to mean less expenses and more opportunities for revenue. So if you apply that overlay, you'll see how the technology is used. You know that when you call a credit card company or your auto warranty company, artificial intelligence is routing your call to the right person. More efficiency. It can do it quicker and with fewer people, generates more revenue or less expenses. And if you take that overlay and really look for the different opportunities where the technology can provide that, you know exactly what the corporate motivation is. Corporations are always looking to maximize profits and minimize expenses. They do it through efficiency. And this tool is just tailor-made to provide that opportunity.
Now, Dr. Gupta, I'd like you to put your scientific glasses back on here and walk us through some AI innovations, artificial intelligence that is catching your attention right now, since you seem to be on the forefront of this.
Well, I mean, of course, everybody has heard about ChatGPT, right? I mean, you have to be living in Mars not to have heard about it. So large language models, which is the underlying technology that these tools have been successfully built now. I mean, they've been around for 4 or 5 years, except that OpenAI Foundation that has actually built the ChatGPT system. I mean, they had something called GPT, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So they had GPT 2, 3, various versions of it, and then they're not sort of, you could say, catching on. So they put this question answering type of interface, and all of a sudden, they have it catches like wildfire. So that's kind of the most interesting thing I would say going on. And so what really these machine learning tools do, as Byron pointed out, that they're basically learning the pattern. So what is actually happening is that you have sort of inputs and outputs that you give as examples, and machine learning system will learn the function that maps inputs to outputs, and that function is called the model, and that model is like a program. So these days, as you walk, I don't know if you've noticed, if you travel internationally, you go through passport control, there's nobody there because you scan your passport and you look into the camera, and there's a machine learning system that matches the pictures. And what has happened is that now earlier we could write a piece of software that would do this matching, but that software was incredibly hard to write. I mean, his image processing algorithms were incredibly hard to realize. Now, today you can actually just give examples and learn that function that matches faces. And essentially, so that makes it really easy to sort of write code. So it's any lazy programmer's dream not to have to write code. And so you can just give it examples and it'll learn the function for you. And so that's where productivity comes in. Anybody can sort of code now, quote unquote, right? You just have to give it data. So you give it your loan processing data and it'll write the program or, capture it in the model that you give it a, new customer's information, and it will tell you whether to give the loan or not. College admissions, I mean, all kinds of things where you had to write code to automate it. Now you just give examples and it can learn from those examples the code that should have been written. It's not always perfect, but it does a good job. So I would say, these large language models like, ChatGPT, but I mean, the applications are just enormous because all you have to do is to give examples and then, sort of generate the code. So you can see why everyone would be, enamored and, impressed with it. And it is an impressive technology. It has its limitations, though, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, there are limitations. And I'm really curious. Byron, I've been reading your books in the past, and you've had your ear to the tracks with artificial intelligence for a while. Now, gosh, I looked up all the movies about robots taking over the world, and there's a lot of them, from Space Odyssey on up to iRobot. And so give us a sense of artificial intelligence and how our viewers can actually see this play out as an advantage for their future, and maybe some things they need to be aware of.
Well, that's, I think you hit the nail on the head in that we see it in movies like Commander Data from Star Trek or C-3PO from Star Wars or something. And it looks so real. And we do something called reasoning from fictional evidence. It seems plausible. And then we also don't have a language that treats it as a tool. Our language tends to treat it as a being, as a creature. And we say it sees something, it concludes something, it decides something, it chooses something. And it does none of that. Those are things people do. The core question that if you're sitting there thinking, should I fear this technology or not? Like the core question you have to grapple with is whether or not people are machines. If people are machines, which a lot of AI workers think they are, then someday that would all be true. We would make all of those things, and every 2 years it would double in power and double in power. But if people aren't machines, then no machine will ever do what people do. And then that inverts the whole thing, because then you say, if there's a job or a task out there that a machine can do, then you don't want a person to do it. To make a person do it, well, that we have a word for that. That's dehumanizing. You're telling the person, I want you to be a machine, not a person. And so the sooner we can build machines to do things machines can do, we free up people to do things people can do. I'll say just one thing. It's frightening because it's always so easy to see kind of the threats, and we can't see the opportunities. It's like the early days of the internet. Everybody knew it was going to be hard on the yellow pages and the stockbrokers and the travel agents and the newspapers, and all that was true. All that was true. But nobody saw, Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, eBay, Etsy, all the rest. So it's frightening because you can see what it will disrupt, but not see what it will create. And the thing to always remember is just a tool, and tools increase human productivity, and that's good for people. So people will be able to employ this technology and do more with it, the way a carpenter would grab a nail gun over a conventional hammer. It's a tool that makes them more productive. But if people are not machines, then that will never replace a person in any meaningful work.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about how COVID put us all in boxes, right? And then all of a sudden we were getting out there, and it's just fascinating to see how this human connection, Bruce, this one's coming at you, by the way, this human connection is so important. What are you seeing in the corporate world when it comes to taking technology, chatbots, and making efficiency, as you say, more important and increasing productivity for a better bottom line, but keeping that human experience in the corporate world with connecting with people who truly want to connect?
Well, I love what you both talked about, both you, Vince, and Byron, because you're giving the bigger picture, which I think is critical. This has happened over and over in history. When Gutenberg invented the press, he was seen as a disciple of Satan because the scribes who were writing Bibles by hand saw this as a huge disruption. Then the Roman Catholic Church figured out that, wait a second, with this new technology, we can put more Bibles into the world. And all of a sudden, he was considered the savior of the institution. And this continues to happen. You mentioned COVID and Zoom. So COVID came out and we all freaked out because we could no longer be on the road. We could no longer meet with clients. We could no longer shake hands. And then we found out, wait a second, I can do my same programming, my same things on Zoom. They're different, but they still work. Plus, it gives me much greater outreach. The doctor is in Dallas. Byron is in Mumbai. I'm in Miami. Vince, I don't know where you are. But it doesn't matter because the technology has allowed that to happen. But as Byron said, we tend to look at the negatives. You hear about sharks. Everybody's afraid of going in the water because of sharks. There are 9 shark attacks a year around the entire world. The chance of getting attacked by a shark is almost irrelevant to anybody's life. But we can see the negative. We can't see the positive. And so to your point about how corporations and how companies and how industry is going to use this, the idea is this is another way that we can improve processes. It's another way that we can make outcomes better. And to Byron's point, we can allow people to do what people need to do. There was a great book written in the 90s called Service America, and it talked about ATM machines. Because the fear was ATM machines were going to eliminate banks. Same kind of argument that we're hearing here. And what the author of the book said was, as you add high tech, it becomes more and more important to add high touch. The idea is people will use tech to get cash. People will use tech to ring up their groceries or to pump their gas. You don't have little gas attendants running out anymore. But when you have a problem, you want to speak to your banker. You want to speak to your mechanic. You want that human relationship. And so if people are given the opportunity to do what they do so well, which is to be people, then there seems to me that there's this great opportunity for these two things to coexist and for AI, for the machine learning to become a tool that can better people's lives if it's used properly, effectively, and efficiently.
Well, thank you. Now, Dr. Gupta, I'm going to switch to you, and I'm going to ask an unfair question to peek around the corner. Byron mentioned some unintended jobs and consequences of technology. We talked already about the Gutenberg press and what that evolved to in terms of the printed word, but also the loom, right? The advent of being able to put together materials and cloth. And we look at the car. There was unintended consequences of, let's say, the electric door opener and GPS and all sorts of things that are in cars. So can you help us peek around the corner in the future, what you're seeing around that corner in the future?
So I mean, carrying on that analogy, I mean, calculator is also a good example. I'm sure, there used to be human calculators, and then the calculator comes out, and, academics were worried, for example, then that perhaps, students will become poor in math, but then you use it as a tool, and then, you have to change your problem set and, what you ask in the exams and quizzes, kind of, raise the bar on that. And I think with Chat GPT and all these things, I think similar thing will happen. And it's going to be a good aid that's going to increase our productivity, as has been pointed out. So I already saw yesterday, I think, a new job called prompt engineer, because Chat GPT will behave well, give you good answers if you provided good prompts. So I think there was a New York Times article yesterday, or Washington Post, I can't remember, which said, there are going to be new kind of job already there called prompt engineer. So you will see these new jobs sort of come up, where how to use these tools effectively. But also, things like Chat GPT and GPT-3 are going to allow us to build even better chat bots and other technology that will help us in improving productivity further. And in fact, if you look at Chat GPT, then it really is a pure pattern matcher. I mean, it doesn't really have any intelligence of its own.
I think every 50 years, we eliminate about half the jobs in this country. And yet we have a 250-year history of overall rising wages and full employment. And you think about that and you go like, wait a minute, how are we keeping everybody working and making more money when we're losing half the jobs every 50 years? And the answer is very simple, is that technology comes along and it destroys and automates certain repetitive tasks that are low wage and low pay, and it creates new opportunities, quote, at the top. And then people get worried. They say, well, are the people that are displaced by it going to be able to do those new jobs at the top? And that's not how it works. What happens is everybody just kind of shifts up one notch. A college biology professor might become a geneticist, and then a high school biology teacher gets a college job, then the substitute teacher gets hired on at the high school, all the way down the line. So the question is, can everybody do a job a little bit harder than the job they're doing today? And if you believe the answer to that is yes, which I do, then that's 250 years of economic history right now. Technology creates new opportunities, high wage, high pay at the top, destroys ones at the bottom, and everybody shifts up. Now, the way I think you apply that to your own life very quickly is, in your day, you probably do a whole range of tasks. Some are very simple and automatable, and some are high end. And what you might want to think about doing is, how can you use technology to eliminate jobs of yours that you have to do? And what that does is that frees you up to do the jobs at the top, and you start shifting up. And if you just always do that, how can I apply technology just to make something easier in my life and create a new opportunity for me? You'll never, ever be obsoleted, ever, ever. You'll ride that wave up, and that's 250 years of history. Like, it's easier to scare people about these technologies. I don't think it's a grand conspiracy, but that people are made to be afraid of them, and in a cruel way, because you tell people you're not going to be able to provide for your family anymore and things like that. And it's just not true. And it's, like I said, it's not a conspiracy. It just sells papers, and not newspapers anymore, but it just sells, advertising. And so that's kind of how I think about it. It's not a technology to be afraid of. It's a technology to figure out how to apply in your own life in a limited, even a limited, simple way.
Bruce, what kinds of proactive things can we do in terms of staying on top of this technology, staying in front of it? Where do you do your research? What kinds of things can we be doing to be proactive about the future of AI?
So let me give you some micro and some macro. Micro, to build on what you've heard here already. Yesterday in the New York Times, there was an article about the 60-year career. And it talked about the fact that a 40-year career had a certain pattern, and we all got used to it. But now people are living longer. They're going to be healthier longer. They're going to be interested longer. Technology is going to supplement their abilities. So it talked about a 60-year career. The article is very good at laying out ways of being ready for these changes. That's in the micro. Go read the article. But macro, it's a simple question to ask yourself, and it's very similar to other technologies and other things that are going on. Ask yourself, what do I want? Sounds like a simple question. It's not, by the way. Everybody I've asked answers one of three things. I want to be rich, I want to be happy, or I want to be fulfilled. I could go into why those answers are not quite enough. But if you ask yourself what you want, you'll realize that this tool that we're all being provided with the opportunity to learn about can help us get there. For example, if you're calling your insurance company because there's a problem, what do you want? Do you want to speak to somebody? No. You want the problem solved. And if there was a machine-based solution to solve your problem very quickly, you'd be happy with that. In fact, you'd be much happier than being diverted from one person to another to another. That's a simple example. But if you look at that about your life, what do I want? What do I want for my family? What do I want for my community? What do I want for myself? And then you say, okay, based on that, what should I be doing? How should I be living my life? What should I be learning about? What you realize is that these technologies will give you the opportunity to improve those particular things. You wouldn't get into a car if a car was a new technology and say, okay, just go drive. Maybe people did that before, but now you say, where do I want to go? I want to go to the grocery store. I want to pick my kids up at school. I want to go on vacation. And then you drive there. Use these things as tools. I'll just give one last example, Vince. If you came over to my house and I was in the garage and I was buried in the hood of my car, and you told me you were there. I said, hey, Vince, do me a favor. Hand me a tool. What would you hand me? A hammer, a wrench, a screwdriver? You don't know. If I said, give me a screwdriver, do you give me a Torx, a Phillips, a flathead? You don't know. If I say, hey, Vince, I need to turn this Phillips screw, would you hand me a little Phillips screwdriver? It's right there on the ledge. You could help me. It's exactly the same with this. Don't worry about understanding how it works. Worry about understanding what you want and how you can apply this tool to your life.
For now, if you could give us some closing comments on artificial intelligence. We started with the question, is it meant to be feared, embraced, or somewhere in between? What are your closing comments, Byron?
I think we need to remember that they're machines and nothing more. They're just pieces of machinery, and that people are not that. And so that would be my one cautionary thing. It's an old concern, by the way, that dates back not just half a century to, well, it dates back a long time. So, but I think, eternal vigilance is the only possible remedy.
I think it's critical to keep in mind change will happen, whether you like it or not. So the question is not, is the change good or bad necessarily? It's how are we going to deal with it? And there's a simple way to look at it, and that is to understand there's an enormous difference between advancement and improvement. Advancement is external. There are people out there doing these things, creating these things, inventing these things. But improvement is internal. What do we do with it as people, as families, as companies, as societies? Advancement is empirical. You can measure it. You know how much better, how much faster it's getting. Moore's Law is a perfect example of that. But improvement is emotional. Are our lives getting better? Are we fulfilling our human experience? The bottom line is that advancement is a function of genius, the people who figure this out. But improvement is a function of leadership, the people who are charged with understanding how these things work and how they affect yourself, your family, your community, your company, your country, and so on and so forth. And so the question is not, are these things good or bad? The question is, how do we react to them? How do we create the leadership necessary to make sure that all of these things do improve the human experience instead of create situations that all of us would like to avoid?
Dr. Gupta, give us a summary comment in terms of artificial intelligence from your perspective as a scientist and an academician.
So it's a great technology. I mean, AI and machine learning and these large language models. So the holy grail in artificial intelligence research has been to build this what's called artificial general intelligence, where the idea is to build systems that can be as good as humans, at least with respect to cognitive tasks. And so if you look at systems like ChatGPT, it seems that they are there, but as I was saying earlier, they're based purely on machine learning. They don't have any awareness. So I would say the next goal is to build systems that have these awareness, just like we do. We look at a sentence. I mean, as humans, we're not operating just by pattern matching. We actually understand the sentence. We build the model, or we import that knowledge and store it in our minds, and then we take actions through reasoning. So adding this reasoning part, which actually has been researched in AI, for the last 50, 60 years, will take us to the next generation of systems that can actually interact and understand and will not hallucinate and produce things that are incorrect and give you consistent and correct answers and provide correct and consistent information. So I think that's where I see the research going next.
Well, thank you all three for your time. If I had to summarize our conversation in 2 words, it would be a collaborative tool, and for us to use artificial intelligence alongside as we grow as a society and the human experience. And to you, our viewers, thank you for joining us. And as always, we bring you different perspectives on things that matter with people who care.